Welcome, everyone. Good morning. I hope you all had a restful night. We're about to enter a very interesting conversation this morning with our speakers. So why are we here? We are here to ask the question, how can universities and civil society organizations help transform the world through dialogue, engagement, and civic education? How can we foster better and equitable civic life by providing safe spaces for students and communities to come together and address some of the pressing issues of our time? We know many marginalized voices are particularly those who are vulnerable to climate change, the pandemic, or drastic economic change, are often underrepresented in engagement and civic processes. So people who face historic and ongoing marginalization may feel ill-equipped to participate in these processes. Universities and civil society organizations can play an essential role in creating spaces for dialogue with communities and co-designing solutions to the wicked problems of our time, be they pandemics, global inequality, or climate change. So we hope they can provide new tools for participation within the walls of universities and beyond. So today, as Patrick mentioned, closed captioning will be available in English. We would ask you if you would like to introduce yourselves in the chat by please sharing where you are joining us from today, and maybe one word for how you are feeling about the sessions at Chula's Futures Literacy Week so far. Just a brief overview of what we will be doing today. In a short moment, you will be hearing from our panel speakers. They will do a bit of a lightning round of presentations, and then we will have a fireside chat where I will ask them some questions. And then after that, we will open it up so that you may also interact with them and ask your own questions. Depending on the numbers, we may be able to go into breakout rooms where you can have a more intimate conversation with them, or we may stay in the main room. I will let you know when we get to that part. Finally, we'll do a little bit of a synthesis, collecting your own ideas on how to think through civic education and the future of civic education. And after that, you will be welcome to join the next session, as I know there are many exciting sessions happening today. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I really encourage you, if you are shy or not used to interacting in this way, to have some courage and some boldness and to please interact with us as much as possible. We know we have many Thai speakers today who may not feel very comfortable in English. A number of our panelists are also Thai speakers, so if you would prefer to express yourselves in Thai, you are most welcome to do so. So that's all I have to say for now. I'm going to introduce our first panel speaker today, Ahmad Rifai from Kota Foundation. Ahmad is the co-founder and executive director of Kota Foundation, an Indonesian NGO working in promoting participatory and democratic urban development processes. With Kota, Rifai built the Urban Citizenship Academy, where future generations can learn about the methodology and tools for promoting change in cities. Selamat pagi, Rifai. Very glad to have you here, and I will now let you present this new academy that you founded.
Thank you, Elodie. Nice to meet you again, finally, after a long time. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ahmad Rifai from Kota Foundation. Just before starting, I would like to introduce Kota, since this NGO basically established at the time where Indonesian democratic transition is happening at the time of between 2010 to until now. So I think it's very crucial to give a background how this NGO also contribute to some extent to the kind of transitions of democratic citizenships in Indonesia. Let me start with my slide. So I would like to kind of provoke the conversation today by introducing one of our initiative called Urban Citizenship Academy. Even though Kota Kita work in a range of different urban issues in Indonesia, ranging from issues of mobility, in urban informality, climate change, and many other issues, we also have created a kind of academy allowing us to kind of connect with young generation and how to transfer our kind of methodology and tool toward promoting democratic urban development in Indonesia. So why we established Urban Citizenship Academy. So just to give like some kind of backgrounds of our democratic transition in Indonesia. I mean, like before the reform in 1998, 1999, actually Indonesia lived in a quite kind of models of controls and control citizenship where actually the life of the citizen are quite kind of, you know, controlled by the state, where the dominant kind of ideology and how people think about the life in the city is actually quite limited in terms of participation and how they can contribute to the development of the city itself. But after the reform, actually there is quite phenomenon where it's give us quite big kind of chance to open the new life by introducing more kind of engaging participatory life of urban citizenship in Indonesia, where people can express their idea, participate in many of the process of urban development in Indonesia. So I think this is very crucial. At that time then, the civil society layer changed quite drastically, where at the time where before 1999, people are focusing a lot on addressing issues around how to kind of control and give a critique to the government, and it's quite opposition at some point, so they become fist up fist the state. Right now, the civil society layer become more kind of collaborative. They promote more kind of participation and collaboration with the government, and there are many young new movement in the ground where they promote kind of activisms and voluntarism around pressing urban issue, for example trash, and then what is like waste management and many other issues in the ground. So from there, then Kota Kita think that it's really kind of important for Kota Kita to contribute to kind of push and help the growing kind of layer of urban civil society to kind of, you know, be able to kind of contribute more in how to further bring about change in the context of our cities. Next slide, please. So this is what we created actually. So Urban Citizenship Academy is actually like a combination of in-class training and direct engagement with the community, where young activists, especially students as well, can participate. So we actually encourage a group of young kind of activists who already start a little bit they kind of incubation kind of project to kind of come and join our kind of academy and then learn some specific methodology that Kota Kita has been used in intervening in doing intervention with our cities, for example. So I think this is really something that we want to give kind of to these young activists, because at the same time we want to expose them with our methodology, but also we want to kind of them to connect directly with the community. So this combinations of like in-class training, but at the same time also we push them to go to the community, so we connect them with the community and then try to kind of design some kind of possible intervention that they think they can really do in their city are really crucial at this moment. So we really want them to feel how they can get an empathy, how they can understand better about the issue in their community, and also build upon that a collective agency that they can you know, that they can particularly push further the change that they want to really proceed with. Next slide, please. So one of the examples, so this is just an example after the training with Kota Kita, Urban Citizenship Academy, one of the group in Solo, so for example, created kind of a movement with the kids in the neighborhood called Pahlawan Hijau, or in English we can call it Green Hero. So basically this kid actually were organized by these young activists, and they made a campaign along in the neighborhood about how to better kind of deal with the trash and the garbage in the neighborhood. So they make a campaign through especially approaching like the parents to how important to keep the neighborhood green. So for example, they also make a campaign of collecting trash every week. So for example, with this kid, it's actually quite amazing because they can do more kind of, you know, active kind of promotions about how to better maintain and keep the neighborhood clean. Especially this kid live along the riverbank, where many of the people actually deal with issues around trash in the riverbank area. So this is really kind of amazing movement that the group already organized in one other city. Another example of the movement that come up from this academy, for example, a movement called Subcyclists in Surabaya, where young people organize kind of cyclists in the city to kind of create a hashtag in the city called Wani Mancal, or like Dare to Cycling, which is actually try to mobilize as many as possible cyclists to share the kind of so they collectively like organize the bikers in the city, and then they can lend their bike to other people who want to make a journey in the city of Surabaya. So for example, this hashtag has been followed by many young people in Surabaya after that, to kind of promote further about kind of cycling in the city and introduce more kind of sustainable mobility for the future in Surabaya city. So for example, I think I would like just to kind of finish up my kind of presentation today, because I just want to provoke that this particularly how we can contribute to our current kind of process of citizenship, and how civic education are kind of introduced by Kota Kita in terms of our urban kind of contact in Indonesia. Thank you very much. I give it back to Elodie. Thank you, Elodie.
Thank you, Rifai, and some very provocative ideas here around, again, how we build agency, how we bring young people back into community to really feel that sense of empathy for what is happening there. Next, I would like to invite Professor Athapol from Chulalongkorn University to present. Professor Athapol is the Director of the Center for Educational Research and Development for Sustainable Development at Chula. He has worked more than 20 years as a teacher educator, and has engaged with education for sustainable development and global citizenship education. His work on active learning activities with integrated curriculum have been developed for pre-service teacher training in the Faculty of Education. Professor Athapol.
Good morning, everyone. I prepare maybe 50 page slides, so we have got 5 minutes. I would like to focus on the civic engagement and education during the COVID-19 disruption. Pick up the case of Thailand youth movement. As you know about the situation in Thailand, up until now we have got like a loss of the decade between the people because of the political conflict, and we are faced the long-term democratic retreat in Thailand, the conflict between the red shirt and yellow shirts, and also moved to the 8 years ago, we have got the big campaign to anti the Yingluck movement and lead to the election and the coup d'etat. And up until now, we have got the big challenges for the democracy, and we found that the Thai democracy have the decline. And last, when we have got the general election in year 2019, we found the unfair advantage and the biased environment, and it's like a big challenges for Thai society. Not only the COVID-19 economic regression, but the politics and inequality in Thailand. during the pandemic, we have got the 4th wave of the pandemic during the lockdown from last 2 years up until now. And we see the civic movement and political protests on the street, on and off, depend on the situation of the COVID-19. And its impact to all citizens in Thailand, especially in the youth movement. So the second wave of the pandemic happened in Nakhon Pathom and Mahachai in the fish market, where the Myanmar labor in Thailand live together there. And this on and off, the return of the protests on the street from time to time. And last August, we have got maybe more violence situation between the protester and the policemen. And during that time, it's a hard time for Thai people. And we found that the political feedback is totally changed to the Thai influencers. And also at the same time, we found the strength of the people to work together. For example, the community self-organized a shelter for one who found the COVID-19 injection. And we see the strong network among the Thai civil society and the volunteer to cope with the situation, and also the multi-stakeholder in the community as the temple monk. Its impact to many people, and it's also like a wake-up call for the young generation to join the protest and to involve themselves in the political movement. What I observed from the situation for 2 years, we found the return of the student movement. It's like a first time within the 5 decades. For the background in Thailand, that citizenship education is a compulsory program in school. We have got the content on the social studies focused on the political engagement, and also the civic education. In Thai, we call Nati Polam. Within these 2 years, we found the active role of the student, especially secondary school students, to join the protest and also to give their voice to the public. For example, in Timodom Suksa School, very elite school in Bangkok, we have got the mob in the rain in that time, and we have got the white ribbon movement from September to October in 2021. And the movement for campaign on uniform free in the secondary school in nationwide, and also the confrontation between generation, the young and the elder one, in school and in community. It's like the chaotic time for school because students they try to negotiate and make their voice stronger and stronger to teacher. The growing up of the coup and the authoritarian culture is a cost to the active role of the student in many schools, and also the new landscape of the learning through the social media. So they learn from each other. Maybe students from Chiang Mai, from Ubon Ratchathani and Phuket, they join in the same platform of the Twitter and they share the movement in that school. And the last factor is about the K-pop and also the social network among young generation, like a K-pop fan club. So you see they try to share their concern about the political issues, and they use the power of the young generation through the protests. One case is happened in last year in BTS and MRT when they closed to follow the government command to stop the protest. The K-pop fan club group, they respond to stop ad buying in BTS and MRT. And they change to buy the ad for the local transportation like a tuk-tuk and also the speedboat in Jacquet River. It's bring about the debate among people about the concept and differences of the active citizen. And it's a long time for the politicizing the citizenship education in school. And the ideology of the good person is based on the Buddhist value and ethic, and the volunteerism and the structural problem. What we have learned for our kids is about the engagement in democratic movement, and we see the role of the teacher to bring about the safe space for students to discuss about the situation outside the school in the classroom. And they can recreate the meaningful learning for politics and democratic education in school. And we very concerned about the confrontation between generations. And what we learned from our school teacher, they also move as a civic movement like the student. And young generation teacher, they call out and stood with the student in the movement. In school and outside the school. I have got a quick response from some school to provide the space and time and activity for students to discuss about the situation outside the school and discuss on the school rules and interaction between students and teachers. In public school, in private school, everywhere in Thailand within these 2 years, very active. One case that I would like to elaborate more is about in Bangkok Metropolitan. We have got the one platform set up for 72 school student representatives to discuss and propose their statement to government. And in Chiang Mai, and it's the thing that we have learned, and we found the challenges for Thai society about the political movement in young generation movement. The alignment of formal and informal learning is very crucial. And democratic movement influence students and teachers on the politics and controversial issues. And we found the link and between the citizenship education teacher in different contexts for the teacher learning. And we observe the balancing between national citizenship within the ideology and values. The last point is about the conflict between anti and pro-democracy and its impact education policy. That's what I prepared for the 5-minute presentation for the input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajahn Athapol. Some very deep questions here for us to ponder, as I think these questions also apply in many other contexts. And I think our next speaker will also speak to this. So Dr. Jan Boontinand, who is the director of the Institute of Human Rights and Peace Studies at Mahidol University. She teaches courses in human rights theory, human rights standards and mechanisms, and practical skills in human rights protection. But Dr. Jan Boontinand also did a lot of research on looking at school culture and curriculum in Thailand and how they contributed or hindered development of democratic citizenship. Dr. Boontinand.
Thank you very much, Elodie. Let me share my screen. So that works. Oops, sorry. That's not the first one. Can you see my screen? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, and is that in the full screen mode? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Ajahn Athapol, actually for your presentation, because it helps me a lot to set the context of what I'm trying to input here in a few slides that I've been asked to prepare. So as Ajahn Athapol said earlier, that civic education in Thailand has mostly been focusing at the basic education level, so at the primary and secondary level. But we've seen more recently, well, in the past decade by now, that the university education is also becoming open to civic education or citizenship education, and there are compulsory courses in some of the university on civic education. My interest in general on this topic is actually on the role of education in contributing or hindering democratic development in Thailand, and this emerges from the background that Ajahn Athapol was sharing with you in the past almost 2 decades now, what Thailand has gone through in terms of political crisis, democratic transitions and conflicts in Thai society. I wanted to know what education has to do with it. And for me, when we talk about civic education, I believe that all form of education is civic education, because education is not neutral. education is politicized. There's certain message, certain values that being delivered through curriculums, to school practice and cultures. Education is politicized, and a form of education can be considered civic education because it influences how it shapes the way citizens can think, speak or not speak on certain topics, or engage in certain things or not. So my quick prompt here is to ask us to think about how do we transform education, civic education, or education for that matter, to enable the development of justice-oriented citizenship. Athapol also touched a little bit on these different types of citizenship that maybe we can elaborate and discuss in this session. So basically what we see as traditional civic education, at least in Thailand, but I believe in many other parts of the world, is to focus on getting young people to become good, responsible, and active citizens through volunteering and community services. In Thailand, now at the university level, it has even, civic citizenship or community service has even become part of the condition for students who take loan, the government loan, to perform certain number of hours of volunteers or community services. But these kind of services that we hear about, that we've seen around Thailand or around the world, focusing on getting people to help the community, constructing and building, contributing to cleaning up efforts. Our first speaker talked about a group of young people working on trash collection. So those kind of community activities for communities are quite common for this traditional, I would call traditional type of civic education. And this is all good because, for the students themselves, for the young people themselves who engage in these type of activities, they can develop confidence, they can develop leadership skills and many other important skills for themselves to grow. And for communities, a lot of these activities can be very useful and help the community to overcome some of their issues and challenges they face. And so there's a lot of positive aspects for this kind of community engagement. But we also realize that some of the community services that we've seen, at least in Thailand, that work with community can also lead to some tensions. If it's not carried out well, not in a proper and participatory manner. Some of the activities can be done very superficially, for example. So we want to see the kind of engagement that is more critical and more impactful. And the question here is how do we think about this kind of processes that can enable a more impactful and critical engagement through civic education from the university or outside the university in school context or in different contexts. The other challenge that I want to bring here, and I think it's the theme of this conference, is actually that our world is more connected, more complex, more diverse, but more fragile also than ever before. The issue of climate change, the conflicts, the kind of tensions between different groups of people and sector, religion beliefs, and violence that we've seen in different parts of the world. It's alarming, and it's just showing us that the future will be different. The future would be more challenging for us to deal with. And so we need the kind of citizens who will not only volunteer to help, but also to raise questions on difficult local and global issues that not only just have, behavioral costs. It's not like people throwing trash something. It's, maybe it's something with how you, your attitude your belief about this, your understanding about this. But a lot of issues that we're facing in the world or in our own societies have what I call structural roots. So related to culture, relates to politics and economics, you know. So how do we get young people to engage in this kind of community services or volunteering, but at the same time, you know, thinking deeper and also asking hard questions and coming up with some alternative solutions other than just addressing, you know, it alongside, I would say, not other than, but alongside addressing some of the other aspects that can perhaps be changed through some behaviors and some change in your own practices. So I just want to share a little bit here that we, in the past few years, I have conducted research looking at using philosophical inquiry as a pedagogy for teaching critical thinking and democratic citizenship. And some of this, we organized a conference to close the project last year. And these slides are from the conference called Thoughtful Citizen. So basically, with with those engagement that we see the young people engage, how do we take them deeper into understanding the causes and processes and asking questions? And I think this, you know, process of having that inquiry together, collaborative inquiry, that can promote the type of thinking that we call critical, creative, and caring thinking. So together with peers, the people who will be doing the activities together, and students in class, how do we talk about the issue of religion conflicts, for example, religion differences, freedom of religion, or these other research participant did something on media literacy and working on how to get students think about fake news, you know, working with the communities, also trying to understand the media messages and working with them to help raise different questions. And so try to understand what kind of messages or what kind of propaganda, let's say that way, if there's things like that being being delivered through different sorts of media, or engaging this by criticism. This was not part of my research project, but we invited them, this group, to talk about the work that they did. So asking, you know, opening the space for young people to have a journey through a train ride in Bangkok, from Bangkok to a province nearby, and to understand the situation, the way of lives and problems that the communities along the railway face, and then collectively analyze that causes and what solutions could be offered. So what I'm trying to say here is that we need to think about different sets of not only skills or literacy here. How do we develop kinds of new habits and dispositions for young people to be able to think and not just act as well, but to think more critically, creatively, and caringly about issues, and to dialogues, and to perhaps form more tentative positions that can be influenced for change. Because I think what we see today here is people so much hold on to what they believe, which in a way is positive. It's good, and you need to have that belief for yourself. But when it's not able to change, you don't open to other views or other opinion anymore. And so it raised a lot of difficulties in trying to build community together, trying to work together to coexist. So how do we co-create the knowledge, you know, with students, community, in different spaces, to offer education, civic education that is more critical and impactful? So that's the question that I hope we can discuss during the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jan Boontinand. And again, this idea of how do we create more empathy, more understanding, more connections between communities. So coming back to some of what Rifai had shared earlier on. Thank you so much. Next, I would like to invite Mrs. Mariko Komatsu, who is the Global Collaboration Coordinator with the Hiroshima Organization for Global Peace. Mariko joined the Hiroshima Organization for Global Peace in 2021 to promote the nuclear weapons abolition agenda before the centennial of the nuclear age in 2045. Mariko has always been interested in nuclear justice, and she is currently a PhD candidate in social psychology, researching the interrelatedness between trust, risk perception, and civic engagement, especially in youth. So Mariko, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name is Mariko Komatsu. I would have your 5 minutes to give my part of presentation about on the topic of roles in university and civil society in the terms of civic education. I think it was the theme of this panel. But the topic that I will give you presentation about is a peace education. I hope you find it's relevant to the time, unfortunately. And peace education and the civic education is like is a close friend. In as I go through my presentation, I will explain how I view this those roles of university and civil society in terms of peace education and those 5 the clusters that I just here listed to cut short of the time. I am an individual happily working for those 2 organizations that I list on the right. Hiroshima Organization for Global Peace, HOPE, it's an organization in Hiroshima Prefecture government, and Educational Vision Research Institute, EVRI, that's in Hiroshima University. But my presentation is a personal view and doesn't necessarily reflect the position of those groups. I am involved in Hiroshima University as a coordinator of Peace Educators Archive. You know, Hiroshima, everybody, the first people I've met so far have always known my city for whatever the education that they have received. In the 1945, the first nuclear weapons was dropped in the wall. That single atomic bomb killed tens and thousands of people. Peace education has always been in part of Hiroshima education, but in if I may say that in the very limited, very certain form of disarmament education, we have had this. We had those survivors. We call them hibakusha, people telling their testimonies, which is very hard to do, to reflect on their painful past and present and sometimes future anxiety that they have due to the radiation exposure. We learn from them how difficult those time back then, and then it will continue to the horrors in the future of nuclear war. But in education, as the past presenters may have said, that is highly politicized. Peace is politicized, as we see. Everybody seek for their own peace, for their people, for themselves. And the peace education was also politicized as well. It's a highly organized act of education, and then you need resource. You need a support to carry through in your busy schedule of school days. Especially if you're a teacher, you need those the backup of materials and the environment to support carrying those educational agenda to your students over years. So when we look back on peace education in Hiroshima, we have realized that there are different versions of it, different versions of peace education. It's even in Hiroshima, it's not just a very monolithic the curriculum nor agenda. So we decided to actually go visit peace educators over the years and ask the same question, 5 questions. Why did you do, what was your stance on peace education? What was your passion? What was your mission of peace education? And that really revealed the individual teachers' backgrounds, and then the time of when they're teaching in the supporting environment really reflects on the material that they gave in the classroom as well. We make it into the video archive to show it with and to share it with the world and share it with our student teachers in Hiroshima University, because they are bound to give those peace education as they go into the field. However, that also revealed that the lack of certain perspectives in Hiroshima. Actually, peace education is practiced all over the world in very different ways. Currently, this global program called Mapping Peace Education is happening. And according to them, there are 16 varieties of peace education. Actually, civic education is one of them. So this making the archive, video archive for ourselves really opened our eyes to different kind of peace education narratives all over the world, not limiting, not specified in, of course, atomic bombing, but different kind of human rights, civic education, and different versions of peace. And using those archives, we have opened the dialogue between the speakers, different teachers, different generations, and also the practitioners and researchers to dissect peace education, and we allow the dialogue to take part, exchange views, exchange our purpose and aims for peace education. This really gave us the idea of we have to go across the fields. We have to have a dialogue with different, the people of different perspectives, different stakeholders. They have a different narratives that fleed ourselves and pushed us to the next step in the agenda of aiming different futures. So as Hiroshima, we have this mission of aiming to the world without nuclear weapons. And we have worked for over 70 years with hibakshas and with people around the world to achieve this, the nuclear-free world. However, it's been static, although this treaty of the nuclear weapon, the ban that bans nuclear weapons in 2020. We would like to see, though, more push and to achieve the global consensus over the sustainability of our future. That flees our discussion from this very close circle of people who are aware of the nuclear horror, but then we expand to talk with different stakeholders who are interested in gender, who are interested in environments, who are interested in human rights, who are interested in their own national interests, which is, of course, their rights. So now I'm talking about Hiroshima Prefecture's approach is to start dialogue over the sustainability of our future. Yes, we do respect our survivors, and then we do respect their experiences and everything that they have done so far to sharing the horror of what if scenario, the horror of that they have experienced with the nuclear weapons. But one study recently comes up with our organization's counterpart, NTI, Nuclear Threat Initiative in United States. They did some study to say people are afraid of committing themselves to something that they're presented just as a pure horror. They need to have a perspective of a future to be interested in the issue. That was with the American audience, and then we need to see if it's applicable to the other nationalities. But I think the message is we can apply it to our approaches too. We often feel responsible to share how we failed, how it is how the system failed us, and with the anger we often talk to our young students or younger generation. But we need to be with the younger generation and different stakeholders talk about how futures can be sustainable, what kind of futures they want to live in, and not only themselves, but to be fair with the others too. It's just not transferring the responsibilities, not transferring the burden to others. How can we peacefully coexist, in the future? So drawing those future visions together will actually build communities, and then sharing the agenda as well. So coming back to the talking point, I think the university is fairly long-standing institution, unlike the civil society or some organization that doesn't last so long, unfortunately. University can serve as a great archives of the past initiatives with the future visions. And then we often talk about the safe space for students, but it's a safe space for students to learn about the past, examine the present, and then talk about the future, different kind of future that we can together co-create. So we can model as a respectful allies of those people who face the issues. We can face issues together, but then we continue to make dialogue and reflect from those learnings reflect in those learnings, and then develop to the new higher level, and make sure that no one should be left behind in this dialogue and then development of the things. I think that is very important to make sure that we democratize education, to listen to different narratives of people, to continue build the better future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mariko-san. Some very interesting ideas here. Again, thinking about the stories, how we weave the past and the future together. I'm reminded of Dr. Terry Tafoya talking about stories and how there are stories within stories and stories in between stories. And that dialogue is about exploring all these narratives and how they weave with each other. So thank you so much. Our last speaker this morning is Dr. Toshiyuki Doi, who is an academic advisor at the Institute for Asian Studies at Chulalongkorn University, and has been helping IAS implement the Civic Engagement 4.0 project. Toshi has taught language and content courses to youth at universities and non-formal educational settings around the world, including Japan, the US, and Thailand. Dr. Toshi.
Thank you, Elodie. Hello, everyone, and I hope my voice is clear. Yeah, okay. My contribution is a little different from the previous four speakers. I will not be focusing on any particular movement or geographical locations, but it's something cross-cutting. And I'll be talking about how we engage. And yeah, thank you. It's coming up. All right. I think Elodie somehow has the capability of seeing the future, because I would like to start with a story. Okay. Some years ago, I was invited to a retreat of one NGO in Thailand, and it was a Thai office of a US NGO. So some members travel to Thailand from the US to attend this meeting. All right. And also members from countries like Thailand, Myanmar, and some other Asian countries were also there. The retreat, the meeting started, and it was run in English, right? And as you can imagine, native English speakers or those who are very fluent in English completely dominated the floor, right? Then English non-natives kept silent. Until at one point, one US participant noticed this. So he stood up and said, hey, only English natives are talking. Non-natives should also speak up, right? Can you imagine what happened next, right? The same English native speakers continue to speak up, okay? They took turns and said something like, yeah, we must encourage non-natives to talk. They shouldn't be shy. We should make this meeting more participatory, etc., etc. In other words, the same English natives continue to dominate the meeting, and the non-natives kept silent. Next slide, please. What can we learn from this episode? Okay. We often know what is good, but it is quite difficult to practice accordingly. Why? I think one of the reasons is because our behaviors, like how we engage with each other, reflects the structure and values of a larger society. So we are sort of, in a web like this, as you can see on my slide. In education, we believe that teachers know better than students, adults know better than children, speaking English is better than speaking in some other languages, etc., etc. More than that, every time we engage with each other, we reproduce, and even reinforce these values and structure. So teachers, including myself, would say again and again, we must have more interactive class, and students would listen quietly, right? Finally, teachers would say, oh, sorry, I'm running out of time. No time for discussion. See you next time. Okay? And some students might feel perfectly okay because they don't have to speak up. I think we need to do something about this if we are really serious about civic education and civic engagement. First of all, we must be more conscious of how teachers and students, adults and children or young people engage with each other, and try to make a change there, right there, no matter how small that change might be. It certainly causes maybe oftentimes disruption and even discomfort. But I would say we should take disruption and discomfort when we engage as signs that we are stepping out of our comfort zone. Next slide, please. Now here, some might say new technology can improve how we engage. I agree. Can you start the video, please? All right. Take virtual reality or metaverse, for instance. This short video on my slide can give us some ideas of what metaverse can bring into education. This is a virtual playroom, but we can set up a classroom like this in metaverse. Okay? Right now, we are looking at something like metaverse in two-dimensional ways, but in actual metaverse, we can actually get in there and have a three-dimensional experience. So we can create our own avatars with profiles and skills which we don't have in the real world. Okay, so we can be a robot like this, or we can fly around in the air, or we can invite animals, plants, and fish into our science class. Some people have already started what they call metaversity, okay, where you can put on these goggles, okay, and learn in virtual reality. Or take Web3. as another example, we are currently at the Web 2 stage, in which platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and MOOC are very useful to education. They are widely accessible and interactive. However, it is said that less than 10% of learners actually complete MOOC programs. Web 2 is also centralized, very much centralized by big tech like GAFAM. In contrast, Web 3 is moving into decentralization. We can engage peer-to-peer without relying on big tech. It is still not exactly clear where Web 3 takes us, but decentralization will affect education across the board, and especially university education. Why? Because universities have centralized knowledge and education for a number of years. We have long believed that knowledge is created, stocked, and learned at university. But I think this concept of university is quickly changing, and we really need to imagine what university will be like in the future. I'm not meaning to glorify young people, students, or new technology. There must be a lot of pros and cons, but I would like to leave them for our discussion. So I will stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Toshi-san. Again, lots of things to think about. Before we jump into questions, I would like to invite all of our participants today to start to share some ideas. So our wonderful tech facilitators will post in the chat a link to a Jamboard, and I would invite you to use that to start putting some ideas and some questions there that you are also grappling with. But just to get us started with questions, I'm going to invite again all our speakers back on. And we had a question actually earlier from one of the participants. I think it was Mr. Yunus, who was asking, as you think about post-reform political changes in places like Indonesia or Thailand, it brings significant changes in how people's voices are being responded to, especially the younger generation. Could you share your perspective on the future challenges in regard to the role of the younger generation and how to deal with the challenges? So I think you've all spoken a little bit to that. And if I may add to Eunice's question, really asking, what is this tension that we have now when we try to reimagine civic education in a context of democracies that may be a bit fragile or fragilizing, and information that may also be more scattered now that it is online and not necessarily as centralized as before. So I will invite any of you to maybe start offering some ideas, and if you could build on each other's comments. And then I'll invite some of our participants to also share more questions and ideas as we go. Would anybody like to start on this complex question? Oh, we've stumped our speakers already.
I can start slowly. I'm thinking also, I might not have all the answer, but I'm just thinking maybe starting from Elodie's additional question on this tension on civic education or education in general. It goes back to that comment that I made about education being politicized. So it's almost like, what is the purpose of civic education? And because the government controls education, and then it's formal education, right? And so there's certain agenda that the people in power want education to deliver, achieve. And maybe that's different from what young people want to have. The kind of space, the kind of issues, the purposes of this whole education, it's very different now. And that tensions emerges much more clearer after this crisis in society's political crisis and this pandemic that shuts down a lot of things and interactions. So I think the challenge for young people now is they have that vision and they want to have that hope and they want to claim more spaces. They want to have more voices, you know, in this different arena, not just how to determine their own education, but there's this tension that who controls, who says what you need to learn, and where, what are the spaces for these voices to be heard and to really, you know, contribute to the co-creation or the new creation of that knowledge or that arrangement or that kind of setting that is more democratized. You know, because I guess people in power who control agenda at the moment would feel very insecure to let go of more states, to allow more states. You can see in Thailand, as Athapol has showed that in the past 2 years, students struggle to come out, but they also face a lot of challenges and backlash and then pushback, right? They go back to school, they face certain kind of controls. You know, these routine things that go on in school, exams. Okay, they can come out to protest, but they still have to go back and sit the exam, right? They have to do all this kind of thing that is part of that system to keep people inside the confined space. So that's a challenge and the struggle that we need to find out how that's people in power we need to understand that things cannot be the same. It will not work. It will lead to something more drastic if you don't open up that space and become more shared space. So I think for my concern is that young people are ready to kind of move ahead, but we don't see the same reciprocal, the readiness from the other part. But also I think with young people, right, they have more, a lot of power and energy. They also would benefit from reflection and openness. I mean, there's this generation gap and there's so many gaps, but it's also important for young people to learn about from other people, right, from different generations. And again, we need that kind of facilitated space, maybe a bit like what Toshi was talking about, you know, and it's hard to change the pattern.
The structures, again, we come back to this idea of structures. And I think Toshi-san, you wanted to contribute something, but I also see one of the participants asks if any of you have tried to get students to design their own learning. And I think maybe Toshi, you could speak to that as well.
Yeah, I can kill the two birds with one stone, maybe. I'll try to be brief and maybe controversial a little bit. Okay, two things can be said. Number one, if I try to stay true to what I said in my initial presentation, I'd feel a little uncomfortable answering the first question without giving young people opportunities to speak up, right? Okay. The second thing is, having said that, I have the experience of actually giving young people opportunities to, you know, design their curriculum or take initiative, whatever. Sometimes what I have witnessed is young people start acting like adults, okay? They're not really coming out of their own box, okay? So I can see, like, when they grow up, they'll be talking just like us. So I think young people also have to be extremely self-conscious and critical of what they say and how they act. And just trying to be a little brief, there, I think some kind of you know, co-coaching or mentorship or apprenticeship, whatever you want to call it, or you know, even peer learning between adults and young people, which was also brought up yesterday's discussion. I think that kind of mode of teaching or engagement is very helpful, I have found. Thank you.
Thank you. And some more comments that are coming up. This need to be very inclusive and not always having predetermined solutions or approaches. And I think maybe Rifai, that's something you've explored quite a bit through your own participatory processes, where you allow people to actually engage with each other and come into discussion to really learn more in empathy. So maybe that's also a missing piece here, how we allow space to interact, but also not over structure those spaces.
Yeah, that's true. So for example, in our experience in working with many of the young group, kind of, so for example, currently we are working on designing kind of solutions for more inclusive kind of public space for kind of disabled and also young children's with disabilities. So for example, it's quite challenging how actually to facilitate this kind of process as well, where we actually need to kind of provide some kind of effort to allow kind of the participation in meaningful kind of processes. So what is the key is that how we can actually better assess what is the real condition in the ground, and then also provide like a correct participatory tool, allowing kind of this kind of young children with disabilities, so for example, to kind of be able to kind of participate in the space that we created. So this is an example that we conducted in Banjarmasin. So for example, many of these kids actually more kind of comfortable with playing rather than actually participating in a way that it's like discussion or something like that. So we provide a lot of like you know, with so for example, what is a Lego kind of, also with we also use like different tools like you know, playing cards, so for example, like that, allowing them to participate in a way they can express they kind of opinion. But back to some challenges in working with the young generation as well, is that in our experience, it's there is some condition where I would like to underline, where there is a kind of, I call it like a digital divide, where actually with the fact that now young generation quite familiar with digital tools, you know, but they access also information online. There's some kind of gap that they think that what already online is the reality, but also the reality in the ground, it's probably quite different with what happened in the space that they access usually online, you know. So like you know, Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok, so for example, like they dominate the kind of the mindset and the narrative that absorbed by the young generation. We found that there has been quite some challenges of how to kind of bring this into it, you know. Our process right now, so for example, we collaborate online of our Urban Citizenship Academy, facilitating like a student from University in Indonesia with student from University College London working together. But the what is this has created also some kind of reality where you know, when we want to transfer what we experience in the ground to the online, and then how the people in UK understand what actually we experience here, is something that it's quite difficult as well to kind of, you know, build some kind of understanding around what happened as well. So challenges around the technology and how to facilitate how the connection with the real kind of experience in the grassroots, in the ground, it's also very important right now, given also with the fact COVID-19 has put us in the situation where online mechanisms are now preferable, kind of an option. So I think it's tricky for activists like us right now, how to better explain the reality in the ground with something that we can present online and conversation with people online. So for example, our work in the ground, communication with marginalized group, where they are not familiar with technology as well. I think it's also tricky at some point, where Kota Kita has also to create different kind of models of how to best facilitate the process in the ground, and then bring it into some kind of process of how to integrate kind of, you know, different intervention or solution that we want to kind of take. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very curious to know, I know we have some young people today in the audience, many students attending Chula's Futures Literacy Week. So I would like to invite, if we have any young students in the room who would like to share their perspective on what they think needs to emerge from a new vision for civic education. Do we have a courageous young person who would like to come and give us some insights? How do you navigate this challenge of technology, of structure, of having to deal with a world that is changing rapidly and sometimes doesn't seem to have much hope, as Mariko said? So I really want to just see if I can see any hands from any of the young people in the room today. I know sometimes people may feel a bit shy, but please unmute yourselves and tell us, how are you dealing with these challenges?
So it's very challenging for us as a professor when we do the online learning to request students to share the idea. And I think it's very typical in some society like Thailand. It's very vertical relationship between teachers and students, right? When we request students to engage, to speak out. And I think the key point that we very interested is about how to create the listening relationship between students and also students and professors in class and in society. To change the relationship from vertical relationship to more horizontal, and to empower them to ask the question. Within this, for 5 years, I see the big change in Thai society. In my own class, students nowadays, they ask many questions. They have doubt about many issues in Thailand, and they would like to discuss in the class, right? And it's very important for us to link between the in-class learning and the real world-based learning. Pick up the situation in the real world to the class and allow them to share the ideas and connect them with many people, because the technological disruption is very important for them. They can access to many information to the influencers, academic people, and they learn a lot from the global perspective, and let them to bring the global perspective to discuss in the class. And it's very crucial for us. And as Ajahn Chan mentioned about the learning activity, should be empower them to reflection on their own action, allow them to work together in communities or in the authentic learning in the society. Thank you.
Thank you. Mariko-san, any insights from your own experience or research into how we break some of these challenges down and how we open up these pathways for us to share stories better?
Thank you. I was thinking, I was trying to place myself in the spectrum of maybe the age or whatever, and that's from young youth to more matured, the lines of speakers and present the participants here. We're always in transient. Like I used to be young, I used to be a youth, and somehow like I got out of it. And those things, like we always have the perspectives that we had before, and without noticing we grow out of it or grow into something else. That process, I was thinking, it's quite similar to the observing or participating in any issues. Like the issues are there with some history, with people who were involved before, and then you come in, you encounter with this issue, social issue, for the first time, but there were histories of initiatives, of history of efforts of people, and then thoughts of people, the perspectives, the background, and you're adding onto it. Like your perspective is very precious. The young people say, young people's perspective is very precious, but it's not standing alone. Like it's okay to voice yourself, but then just acknowledging the past, and then I trying to articulate. It matters. The young people's voice matters, and then recognizing the existing voices also matters. So within this mutual respect, I think it's only possible to have a dialogue. It's not like, you know, like I don't want to sound old people saying like, oh, you recognize us, but it's also, you know, it just kind of like it reflects on what Toshi-san said. You know, just to be very, very critical where you stand and where you had, and then where you were at, and then where you will be going. Just we're always in the change. We're always in the process of change, the building our, you know, self-identity as well. Just being very critical, have a metacognition of your own views, and then what's happening in the society. Maybe it's not very plain view that you expect in the society, what's happening.
So developing skills also for self-examination and overall curiosity to really explore the edges of what we think is reality and compare it to perhaps the edges of other people's realities, whether it's in our own communities, in our schools, but also outside in other countries and other places. So there's something very interesting around the skills building. And I think we often put that on young people, but some of us more middle-aged people also need to practice those skills, expanding our own self-criticism and self-examination. As you said, sometimes I think Ajahn John, you talked about how we get sometimes very attached to ideas and then we forget to criticize them when that's really something we need to practice all our lives. I think we have someone who wanted to say something, but who says, I'm not that young. I think maybe we should just throw this idea out the window. If we have someone who would like to share something, I would really invite you to go ahead. Oh, I see some hands going up. No for one, I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. Please go ahead. And then I think we have Romania also.
All right, thank you very much. Well, I think we have the same phenomenon, like what Ajahn Athapol said. Like we have to start teach online, and the student is just like this right now. You know, some of the students who are very advanced students, who are very participating, they just turn on their camera, and the rest is just like this. You know, I try a lot to you know, bring them, engage them to the class, but just only the good student will always participate, always answer, always do like this. And I try a lot of, you know, the new in the new technology that I can do. Right now, I cannot use the metaverse yet. Maybe I have to study more to do that. Okay. Well, so this is what I can share. Maybe Romania, who is a young person, can say something on the view from the young. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Romania, please.
Okay, thank you, and good morning, everyone. At first, I'm gonna present myself. I'm a third-year student of economics student at Mahidol University, and I'm from the younger perspective. Yes, and I think that One of the factors that are coming to disrupt higher education is the learning behavior of the new generation has changed from the past. And most of people aged 18 to 22 years are self-confident, tech-savvy, like fun, like to find new challenges, experiential, social, interpersonal, accept changing, prioritize action over knowledge, as well as being responsible to society. And the important thing is to focus on their image or online presence. For this generation, computers are no longer a technology, but as a device. One appliance is this generation sees failure as the quickest way to learn. At the same time, doing many things at the same time is called multitasking. It's normal life, but what is generation can't stand this the system to process and delay. From the characteristic and behavior of new generation above, as a result, the learning behavior of this generation has changed. For this generation, they will their own learning behavior as want to learn that they want to know. It's not about being subject to things that we don't have to know. And this is because of generations focus on the practice rather than knowledge. Therefore, the knowledge that the ones want to know and useful, it's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Romania, for these thoughts. And thank you also to Tai, who added a comment here that there's also a cultural aspect that some students actually don't necessarily want to speak. So we might need to think about alternatives, ways of learning and interacting. So again, maybe coming back to Toshi-san's idea that it might be easier to do this in the metaverse, in a virtual reality where perhaps we can be a different person or not have to put ourselves out front so much. I'm noticing we're coming quite close to the end of our time together, and I did want to thank all our speakers tonight for all their contributions, their scholarship, and their invitations to think about civic education differently and to continue to explore these questions together, explore those tensions that are held in our different societies, but also the bridges that we can build across systems, knowing that education does not have to be simply in schools. Education can happen everywhere, in communities, in organizations, in the metaverse, online, through devices, and through just being humans in respect and in relation with other humans. So I want to invite everybody to really think about that as they go into the next session. And I would invite you, just before we land back into the real world, to just take a big breath, ground your feet on the floor and come back into reality, because even though we're in little squares online, we are still bodies interacting with other bodies. So I want us to not forget this part of our humanity that is so important. So thank you all very, very much for your contributions.